Hi, my friends. Today I want to present you a new story. Enjoy watching it.
The sizzle of oil met the sharp clang of steel as I seared scallops to a perfect golden crust. The head chef barked orders across the kitchen, his voice sharp enough to cut through the chaotic din. Sweat clung to my brow, but I didn't falter. In this Michelin-starred kitchen, precision wasn't just expected, it was demanded. "Lisa, table 4's garnishes are wilting," chef snapped. "I'm on it," I barked back, my hands moving faster than my thoughts. Behind me, a voice unfamiliar to the kitchen chimed in, "Need a hand?" I glanced up. A man stood there, mid-20s maybe, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that looked like they'd never seen a hard day's work. He was out of place, his crisp white shirt unblemished, and his hands, smooth and uncalloused, clutched a mixing bowl. "Are you lost, or do you know what you're doing?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Patrick," he introduced himself, offering a sheepish smile. "Temp hire, first day." "Great," I muttered, returning my focus to the task. "Just don't get in my way." Despite my initial misgivings, Patrick managed to keep up. He wasn't fast, but he was eager and surprisingly capable for someone who looked like he belonged in a boardroom, rather than a kitchen. By the end of the shift, he had proven himself, at least enough to earn a grudging nod from chef. After hours, as the hum of the kitchen settled into silence, Patrick lingered by the sink, drying pans with a focus that felt too intense for such a menial task. Curiosity tugged at me. "So, what's your deal?" I asked, leaning against the counter. "You don't exactly scream culinary career." He hesitated, glancing around as if ensuring no one else was listening. "I'm not supposed to be here," he admitted. "No kidding," I replied dryly. "No, I mean it," he continued, his voice dropping. "My parents, they expect me to run the family business. It's this massive real estate empire. But I hate it. I always have. I want to design things, gardens, landscapes, places people can escape to. But my parents think it's a waste of time. They'd lose their minds if they knew I was here." There was a rawness in his voice that caught me off guard. I softened. "So why risk it?" "Because I can't spend my life being someone I'm not," he said simply. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "You probably think I'm an idiot." "Not yet," I replied with a small smile. "But I'm reserving judgment." Over the next few weeks, Patrick became a fixture in the kitchen. He picked up skills quickly, and though he still fumbled with the occasional knife technique, his dedication was undeniable. But something about him didn't sit right. Little things, his phone buzzing incessantly with calls he never answered, the way he tensed every time the front door swung open, as if expecting someone to storm in. And then there was the incident with the delivery truck. It was late one night, and we were unloading produce when a sleek black car pulled up across the alley. Patrick froze, his hands tightening around a crate of tomatoes. A man in a tailored suit stepped out, his eyes scanning the alley before locking onto Patrick. "Patrick," the man called, his voice smooth but sharp. Patrick didn't respond. "Patrick," the man repeated, stepping closer. "Your father's been looking for you. It's time to come home." Patrick's jaw tightened. "Tell him I'm busy." The man didn't blink. You know how he feels about disobedience. The tension in the air was suffocating. I stepped forward, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Is there a problem?" The man turned to me, his gaze cold and assessing. "Stay out of it." "She's not involved," Patrick snapped. "Just leave." For a moment, it seemed like the man might argue, but then he stepped back, his expression unreadable. "This isn't over," he said before returning to his car. As the vehicle disappeared into the night, Patrick let out a shaky breath. "Sorry about that," he muttered, avoiding my gaze. "Who was that?" I asked. "No one important," he replied quickly, but his clenched fists told a different story. From that night on, I couldn't shake the feeling that Patrick's presence in the kitchen wasn't just about following a dream. He was running from something or someone. And whatever it was, I had the sinking suspicion it was only a matter of time before it caught up with him. As the weeks turned into months, Patrick and I became inseparable. It felt like we had known each other forever. We discovered a shared love for nature, cooking, and long conversations about everything from dreams to disappointments. More than that, we had the same outlook on life, a belief that happiness came not from wealth or status, but from pursuing passions and cherishing the little joys. 5 months after that first late-night conversation, Patrick made a bold move. "Marry me, Lisa," he said one evening, his voice trembling but his gaze steady. "Let's create a life together, away from their expectations." I didn't need time to think. "Yes," I whispered, tears brimming in my eyes. We married in a quiet, intimate ceremony, with only a few close friends as witnesses. Patrick's parents had no idea, but secrets have a way of coming to light. When they found out, their reaction was as explosive as we'd feared. "How dare you embarrass this family like that?" his mother shrieked during a tense family meeting. "You've made your choice," his father said coldly, his disapproval cutting through the air. "But don't expect our support." In a punitive move, they sent us to live in Patrick's late grandmother's apartment, an imposing old place that hadn't been touched since her passing years ago. The condition? We could live there only if we respected the rules, including never opening the door to one locked room. A room that, according to Patrick's parents, was not for us to disturb. Patrick and I exchanged wary glances as we packed our bags. The apartment felt cold, like a relic frozen in time. Dust coated the antique furniture, and heavy velvet drapes blocked out what little light managed to filter through the grime street windows. Patrick's late grandmother had lived here until her final days, and it seemed as though nothing had been touched since. "This is where they want us to live?" I asked, wrinkling my nose. Patrick set down the last of the moving boxes inside. "Yeah, it was part of the deal. If we're going to be together, we live here." Their way of keeping tabs on us without actually saying it. "Charming," I muttered, trailing a finger along the edge of a mahogany side table. The dust smeared, leaving a faint mark. "And what's with the locked room?" He froze for a second, then busied himself with unpacking. "Just some family stuff. My grandmother's things. My parents made it clear it's off limits." "Off limits?" I repeated, narrowing my eyes. "In our apartment?" "Lisa," he said softly, "please don't push this." There was something in his voice, a quiet plea that made me let it drop. For now. Over the next few days, I threw myself into cleaning, trying to make the apartment feel less like a mausoleum. Patrick helped when he could, but his family kept pulling him away from meetings, dinners, and other obligations that left him drained and frustrated. One evening, as I scrubbed the kitchen floor, I heard a faint creak. I froze, listening. "Patrick?" I called. No answer. I stood, my heart pounding, and followed the noise down the hallway. It led to the locked door. The doorknob jiggled, then stilled. "Hello," I whispered, my voice trembling. Silence. I pressed my ear to the door, holding my breath. Then, just as I was about to step back, there was a sharp knock on the other side. I yelped, stumbling backward. Moments later, Patrick came rushing down the hall. "What happened?" he asked, concern etched on his face. "The door," I stammered, pointing. "There was something." He glanced at the door, then back at me. "It's an old building, Lisa. Creaks and groans are normal." "No," I insisted. I heard knocking, and the doorknob moved. He hesitated, then placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "You've been working too hard. Come on, let's get you some air." But as he led me away, I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew more than he was letting on. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Patrick slept beside me, his breathing slow and steady. I wanted to believe him, to dismiss the strange sounds as my imagination running wild, but something about the apartment felt wrong. And the locked room felt like it was keeping more than just old furniture behind its doors. The first sign of trouble came early one Saturday morning. I just finished my coffee when the buzzer rang, cutting through the apartment's quiet like a sharp knife. Patrick groaned from the couch. "Ignore it. Probably someone trying to sell something." But the buzzing persisted, insistent and shrill. With a sigh, I opened the intercom. "It's Abigail," came the crisp, no-nonsense voice. "Let me in." Patrick shot upright. "What? Why is she?" Before he could finish, I pressed the button to unlock the door, his sister's arrival already unavoidable. Moments later, Abigail strode in, her designer heels clicking against the worn hardwood floor. She surveyed the room with a raised eyebrow. "Well," she said, tossing her purse onto the coffee table, "this is cozy." "What are you doing here, Abigail?" Patrick asked, his tone sharp. "Mother thought it would be helpful if I stopped by," she replied smoothly, brushing invisible lint off her blazer, to check on things, make sure Lisa's settling in adequately. Her eyes lingered on me, a thinly veiled smirk tugging at her lips. "I'm fine, thank you," I said, forcing a polite smile. She wandered into the kitchen, opening cupboards and drawers without invitation. "You've done a decent job cleaning. Though I can't imagine how you handle this environment." I clenched my fists at my sides, willing myself to stay calm. Patrick stepped between us. "Abigail, stop. You're not here to criticize Lisa." "Oh, relax," she said, waving a manicured hand. "I'm just looking around. After all, this place has history. Some of us actually grew up visiting Grandma here." The jab was subtle, but it stung. Abigail's ability to twist a knife with a smile was unmatched. By the time she left hours later, I was emotionally drained. She'd scrutinized every corner of the apartment, made veiled comments about my cooking, and even questioned my commitment to Patrick. "That woman is unbearable," I muttered as I cleaned up the trail of crumbs she'd left from the croissant she'd casually picked apart during her inspection. Patrick rubbed his temples. "I'll talk to her. She had no right." "She's not the problem," I interrupted. "It's your parents. They sent her here, didn't they, to spy on us?" He hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "They think you're not good enough, that you're just after money." His words hung in the air, heavy and cutting. I laughed bitterly. Typical. Well, if Abigail thinks she can walk in here and rattle me, she's in for a surprise. But my bravado wavered as I glanced down the hallway. The locked room stood silent as always, but its presence felt louder now, almost accusatory. Late that night, I woke to the sound of footsteps. For a moment, I thought it was Patrick, but the bed beside me was empty. I crept into the hallway, heart pounding. The footsteps were coming from near the locked door. "Patrick," I whispered. Silence. Then a soft, deliberate creak, as though someone, or something, was leaning against the door. I reached out, but before my fingers touched the handle, a sharp knock echoed from the other side. I stumbled back with a gasp. Patrick appeared behind me, his face pale. "Go back to bed, Lisa," he said firmly, ushering me away. "But now." The tension in his voice brooked no argument, but as I lay awake in the dark, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was in that room had just crossed an invisible line. I was folding laundry in the dimly lit living room when Patrick came home, his face pale, his jaw tight. He dropped his bag near the door and sank into the armchair with a heavy sigh. "What happened?" I asked, setting down a neatly folded towel. "They've gone too far this time," he said, his voice trembling with frustration. "What do you mean?" He leaned forward, running his hands through his hair. "My parents want to install cameras in the apartment, to monitor how things are being managed. They're calling it a precaution, but it's obvious they don't trust us. Abigail suggested it, of course." I stared at him stunned. "Cameras? In our home? That's insane." Patrick's laugh was bitter. "Welcome to my family, Lisa. Nothing is too controlling or invasive for them." A tense silence hung in the air before I finally spoke. "Patrick, I can't live like this. First Abigail barges in whenever she pleases, and now they want to spy on us? This isn't a marriage, it's a circus." He looked at me, desperation flickering in his eyes. "I'll fix it. I promise. Just don't give up on us yet." But I couldn't ignore the knot tightening in my chest. Later that evening, as Patrick slept, I stayed up pacing the apartment. The locked room, his grandmother's untouched space, seemed to loom larger in my mind. Abigail's smug remarks about hidden treasures replayed in my head, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something more sinister was at play. The next morning, Abigail arrived unannounced, as if summoned by the tension. "Good news," she chirped, a devilish gleam in her eye. Mother and father agreed. "The cameras will be installed next week." "No," I said firmly, my voice cutting through the air like a knife. Abigail's smile faltered. "Excuse me. You heard me. This is our home, not some plaything for your family's whims. If you think I'm going to stand by and let you invade our privacy, you're sorely mistaken." She scoffed, crossing her arms. "You think you have a say in this? Patrick might have married you, but this apartment is still part of the family estate. That doesn't give you the right to treat us like children," I snapped. Abigail's eyes narrowed, her voice dropping to a chilling whisper. "You don't belong here, Lisa. You're just a placeholder, a convenient distraction for Patrick. And once you're gone, everything will return to normal." Her words stung, but they also ignited a fire within me. "We'll see about that," I said, meeting her glare with one of my own. As she stormed out, I realized this was the moment I'd been dreading, the point where everything would either crumble or come together, and I had no intention of letting it crumble. Abigail's obsession with the locked room grew more apparent with each passing day. She prowled around the apartment like a cat hunting prey, her gaze lingering on the antique door handle. The tension was unbearable. Patrick tried to confront her, but she dismissed him with a wave of her hand, her mind clearly fixed on uncovering whatever secrets lay inside. "Why can't she just leave it alone?" I whispered to Patrick one evening as we stood in the kitchen. "She's always been like this," he replied with a resigned sigh. "The more you tell her no, the harder she pushes." That night I bolted the door to the room, adding a chain lock for good measure. Something told me Abigail wasn't above taking drastic measures. The next morning I woke to a strange clatter outside. Patrick was already gone for work, and the apartment was eerily quiet. I opened the door to the living room and froze. Abigail stood before the locked room with a crowbar in hand, her face twisted in determination. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted. She turned, her expression defiant. "I knew you were hiding something in here. Patrick might be blind to your schemes, but I'm not." "Abigail, stop this right now." Ignoring me, she yanked at the door with all her might. The bolt snapped, and the door swung open with a groan. I braced myself for what she might find. Abigail marched inside, only to stop dead in her tracks. Her eyes darted around, taking in the immaculate, untouched space. Antique furniture draped in protective covers, a few framed photographs of Patrick's grandmother, and rows of neatly labeled boxes filled with heirlooms. This isn't your stuff," she stammered, turning to me. "No," I said coldly, "it never was. Patrick and I left this room exactly as his grandmother wanted it. You just desecrated her memory." Abigail's face turned crimson. "What?" I thought. "You thought you'd catch me hoarding secrets or stealing family treasures," I interrupted. "Instead, you've only shown how little respect you have for your own family's legacy." Before she could respond, the sound of a camera shutter broke the silence. Patrick stood at the doorway, phone in hand, capturing the scene. "Patrick." Abigail gasped. "I was only breaking into a sacred part of our home," he finished, his voice icy. "Mother and father are going to love hearing about this." Abigail's confidence crumbled. She stammered excuses, but Patrick cut her off with a sharp wave of his hand. "You've crossed the line too many times, Abigail. I'll make sure this is the last." True to his word, Patrick shared the incident with his parents. To my astonishment, they sided with us. Abigail was banned from the apartment and ordered to apologize. But the most unexpected turn came when Patrick and I decided to leave the apartment altogether. "Let's start fresh," he said, slipping his hand into mine. "Somewhere they can't touch us." As we drove away, leaving the chaos behind, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. Abigail's obsession had been her undoing, and for the first time, Patrick and I were free to live on our own terms.
Friends, what do you think of this story? Write your opinion in the comments. Would you like more stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button so you don't miss any videos. See you tomorrow.